5:30, are you guys ready? Okay, awesome. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the work session of the Talbot County Board of Education. We do have a quorum present, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Our first piece of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. And I do need a motion for the approval of the work session minutes from May 18th.
I make a motion that we approve the work session meeting minutes from May 18th.
Second.
Thank you. All right, then we're going to kick it over to Dr. P and cabinet members for strategic plan priorities.
I don't see the thing in there. I think that's about. Who's in there?
It's right there.
We can just use mine and I'll get it straight later.
Understand.
Okay. This is what.
Perfect, thanks. So what I'm going over is our strategic plan, end of year data. So students came through the door 25-26 school year. We did baseline. So we do our internal assessments to see where they are, and any other metrics that are attached to our 5 priorities. Under each priority, their strategies. So I'm going to walk through any data points that we've collected. And you've seen this data another time. We did beginning, middle, and end, so that you'll be able to see where we are at the end of this year. And this will just be the cadence as we go through the next 3 years with the strategic plan as far as the strategies and the metrics that are attached. What you're looking at is a gauge as to the completion of that particular priority, which it mirrors kind of the picture that we have in our Align by 2029. This will also be a dashboard that we will get on the website this summer so that everyone can see where we are with the various priorities, and then you'll see in the next subsequent slides where we are as far as the strategies. So starting with priority 1, this is academic achievement. You can see the objective, all of the indicators on the right side that we have metrics for and that we'll be continuing to measure with the different types of assessments that we have. Again, this is the dashboard that shows for every strategy that's under this priority where we are. And you could see for majority of them, we're in progress. For 2 of them, we've started, but the green represents we're further in those implementation stages of that strategy. And you could see the percentage of the progress that's being made next to the green or the yellow, wherever it is. You could see the percentages of the progress that's made. And again, the overall progress at the very top for that priority. And so every priority will mirror and look like this. So under academic achievement, there's 2 internal assessments that we use. We use MAP. You can see what that stands for. We use DIBELS. The left side shows you what MAP represents and what it does. And the right side, what DIBELS is used for. MAP is for both reading and math. DIBELS is just for reading. Just to note, across the state, some of the districts use MAP. A lot of them use DIBELS. Right now, the state is determining if MAP isn't approved internal assessments, but right now there are discussions as to what is going to be the list of the internal assessments that will be used throughout the state. But I just wanted to put this up as a reminder as to what we're measuring.
So why do we use MAP over any other assessment data piece?
So MAP is, well, you could see it ramps up. So let's say you're taking the test and you're getting all of the questions right. It'll start ramping up, making the questions even harder. So it could give a more accurate picture as to where your level is.
Thank you. So I'm wondering how evidence-based is MAP over any other assessment tool, since not all districts use MAP?
Yeah.
I'm wondering, how do we compare this over any other assessment data tool? That kind of is where my question is.
So that's a good question. And I sat on the Assessment Accountability Committee where we talked about the background of all of these type assessments. There's another assessment called iReady that some LEAs use. And I don't know, I'm looking at Ms. Warner to see if any of her conversations or even Dr. Einhorn has talked about the pros and cons of all the different type of assessments. From, I've used MAP in Delaware. What I've heard and just remembering the years, it's closely aligned to the state assessments that we use and to the Common Core and the standards that we're testing. But I don't know if either Ms. Warner or Dr. Einhorn, if you've been at the table of any other conversations of comparisons.
So at this point, MAP is one of the approved screeners and assessments. I will say we just received a memo recently that iReady is not, and that is the other common screener in Maryland. So as of now, I would suggest that we stay with MAP because of the reasons that Dr. Pepikai just mentioned, with it being a predictor of performance on MCAP. I think that we also need to consider that the assessment is changing to MSTAR with some standards changing next year. So I think at this point, I would recommend we stick with what we have until the state gives us any guidance if they recommend any other screeners with their new assessments.
I do think, though, what we can do, though, is get from the state, like the approved assessments that they are sending out to all the LEAs, what goes behind them being approved. Like, why did they take iReady off but keep MAP on? So that's information that we can get. So at least you know what goes behind them choosing. And then DIBELS, again, another assessment. But again, we could find out like why most and a lot of LEAs use DIBELS opposed to something else. So this is the MAP data for ELA. So I know it's a lot of small numbers there, but you could see overall, if you look at TCPS and you can see the very top here, the top bar in each of these sections, the light blue, is when students took it when they first came in, the beginning of the year. This blue is when they took it in the middle of the year, and this is when they just took it at the end of the year. So beside each group, you could see the light blue, the middle blue, and the dark blue. And of course, what we want to see is this dark blue longer than the light blue from when they came in to what they just took here in the spring. And again, this is for ELA. You could see overall, you could see the grades 1 through 8. These are all the grades that took it. These are the subgroups that the state looks at. So whenever we're taking assessments, we look at these different buckets of subgroups of students to make sure that we're growing as well and looking at the various gaps between the groups.
So 6, 7, and 8 are not growing.
Yep. Oh, sorry. So yeah, so if you look at 6, 7, and 8, you could see the bars are not, yeah. So, and this is the work that then we look at to say, we'll look at this, we'll look at what our state assessment will tell us in a couple of months, in a month actually, and then compare. But you're right, you could see 6 here. There's growth here in 7th, there's growth here in 8th, beginning to end. So looks like 6, and it's really small, 0.2.
So when do we give it at the end of the year?
I believe the month is April, maybe April. I think the month is April.
Right after Easter? The reason I ask, I'm using my husband as the guinea pig here. He has a big issue with testing right after Easter. So I don't know, I haven't given you a chance to answer the question, but that's the point of my question.
No, we actually have testing windows, so it gives it gives schools a little flexibility in those windows. We generally don't advise testing right after a break like that. So I don't believe that that's happening in most of our schools for the end of year. The other thing to know is that, as Dr. Pepakaya mentioned, this is an adaptive test, so that the test that they take at the middle of the year, beginning of the year, end of year is not the same test. So it's not that they took the same exact test 3 times and scored the same. The bar increases based off of what's expected that they would make in gains as they go through the year. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear, that there is growth, but that growth is for those students as to be expected by the end of the year.
Because the test is getting harder,
Correct.
in other words. Okay.
What about the demographic groups? It seems like some of the demographic groups either stagnated or went down in scores.
Yeah. So again, it's based on, the peers of those groups across other peers. And like I said, the test is, it ramps up or it levels down depending on that student. But again, this is just data that we're going to be looking at and dissecting.
So what do the percentages actually represent?
So the percentages are, let me get this right, because myself and Mr. Neo, we were all talking about this. And even when I used to administer this for MAP, it's 50% of the growth for students. But I can get the actual verbiage for this because it took me some time to wrap my head around that. And I don't know if anybody else could articulate it better than I can, but it's not like 75 out of 100. It's not 100% as the cap we're looking at. It's normative, so it's based on like 50% of students of that same grade of how they're doing with their peers. But I can get the actual, because it's not like 100% test like we would look at. But I can get that. And I don't know if.
So there's 2 ways that we look at MAP data. We can look at growth and we can look at proficiency. And I believe this is looking at our proficiency, which is looking at, again, it's to replicate what MCAP would look like at that point in time in the school year for that child. So if we're looking at 3rd grade and they take it at the beginning of the year, that helps get baseline of what would be expected of a 3rd grader going in the beginning of the year, what skills they should have. What this is looking at is they have a way to replicate MCAP in similar, it's not exactly the same, but similar scores of a 3 or 4, for example. They don't necessarily use those numbers, but they color code it for us on if a student is on grade level or surpassing. And what we tend to look at are those students, when I think about in this colors, they're green or blue. We tend to lump those together because those would be students that would be predicted as passing MCAP at that time. So Dr. Pepakaya is correct that it's not like a standard 100% scale. It's based off of a standardized assessment, a replication of it.
Do you get the data in time for students who are struggling to be able to assist them for the state testing?
Yes, we get immediate data. So as the curriculum supervisors in teaching and learning tend to look at it as it's coming in, because some schools might finish it sooner than others, and they use that data immediately. We've also been using it in middle school as well for placing students in interventions and guiding that work with students who may be in their WIN blocks or whatever it may be, so that we can give some better guidance on what supports they need.
And this assessment also, and I actually just pulled it up, it pinpoints the specific skills and how there's also a RIT, which goes into a whole nother thing. RIT stands for Rasch Unit, RASCH scale. And it says it acts like a yardstick to measure a student's progress across multiple school years. But the percentile ranks the student's performance against national norms for students in that same grade. And what it does, so it'll be able to tell a teacher the skills that a student is doing well in or needs assistance in, as well as families too. So the reports, there's lots and lots of reports that go with this after students take it.
So for example, can you walk us through like grade 3? They started out 52.7%. That's where that was their baseline.
That's when they came in, yes.
And then mid-year,
They took it again, 58.6, and then they took it again, 58.8.
so what was their, I'm thinking like grade level. So 58% were on grade level. Is that what that's measuring?
I don't know if I would equate it to grade level. Yes. Proficiency to, yes, thank you, to other third graders that are taking that test.
Well, does it mean that they're in, let's see, if looking at that, does it mean they're in the 52nd percentile as compared to others? Or does it mean that 52% of them were proficient?
I don't want to say proficient, but I'm thinking I wish Mr. Neal was here, who lives in this data world. But we can get that, because I think it's 52% of third graders are where they should be compared to all third graders.
This is the one that comes home.
Correct.
To the parents
Yes.
or to the guardians.
Correct.
And allows them to know where their
Correct.
student is.
Correct. Yes.
So then how do we see that as equating to,
So that's a
Yeah,
good,
to
so, and I've seen reports previously of that correlation of this to a state test and the closeness of that, which we'll look at. And I'm sure Mr. Neal has it from last year of looking at that.
But if I may offer, one of the powerful things about this data is not just looking at it this way, because this is just a number, but the schools are actually using this as part of their school improvement process that they shared with you previously. So what they're looking at is each individual student, and they're also concerned about the growth that the student is making. So you might have a special education student. When we look at those numbers there, that seems relatively low. But we know, based on students' individualized needs, they may be what we consider sometimes below grade level. We want to make sure with this data that students are making a year of progress over the course of a year. So the schools are actually looking at growth targets for each student. And that is generated by where they start, where it's projected they're going to move in the year based on their assessment. And then the teachers are tracking that in real time to determine whether they need to accelerate learning for students, whether student groups need to be changed for interventions. So the real importance of this data is at the school and classroom level, because it informs instruction in real time.
So then is this how you make up classes? You group them by how they will be challenged?
There's a lot that goes into the makeup of a classroom. What a teacher does with the data is determine what instructional strategies to use for the whole class, and then how they might differentiate instruction in the classroom, say with a tier 2 intervention in the classroom to give additional supports to students. So it's really diagnostic throughout the course of a school year how we use this data, but it's meant to inform teachers' work in instructional strategies to meet student needs in real time.
What I've seen also is that teachers will get their report. Let's say they get it after the first light blue bar. They come in the door, they get the report. So then they'll go to their students and say, looking at this data, it says that adequate growth for you would be X. So let's see if we can make X. So then mid-year, they take it again. They check to see if they made that. If not, they keep working. If they do make it, then it's going to say, okay, now we need to grow you to this. But the report spells all of that out for teachers to be able to see.
So each individual student has this.
Their own individual report. Yes.
Can I ask that the schools that we didn't get to visit during this past school year to look at more in depth at their development plan for students? Can we look at that sometime mid to late fall? I
Yeah.
mean, obviously not the first month of school.
Yeah,
but-
exactly. Yeah. Yes.
And
we
then
go ahead.
my final comment is it's not really a question, it's more of a statement, but the TCBS bar at the top is the average of all of the below. Is that correct? Including, for
Correct.
example, the IEP students?
Correct. It's everything. Yeah. Yep. So, and I just pulled out, this is internal beginning to end, second grade, largest gains there, but all the groups demonstrated growth. What you're going to hear as well with the new state assessment that's going to be coming out, which is going to be called M-STAR, there is a huge, I'm not going to say shift because I think people are always looking at growth, but more discussions around growth and not just proficiency. So you'll start to hear as that gets rolled out in the fall. So this is math. Again, mirror just like the ELA chart, TCPS at the top. The same, they come in, middle, end. Obviously, we want the beginning, the end to be more than the beginning when they came in. But again, all the grades and all the subgroups. And highlights from this, again, it's, the math is just the same. It adapts, it ramps up, or it goes lower. So someone can know exactly where a student is. 1.4 increase. First grade had the largest gains, and then 3 subgroups had increased for math.
What about all those grades where they were significantly decreased? I mean, it
Yeah.
looks like in the middle school. So if we have these, then why do we, what are we doing with the groups? Like, if we have this information,
Mhm.
then how are we grouping the kids so that they're getting the right interventions that they need?
So it's looking at each student and looking at all of their data, not just this, every piece of data that we have, laying it out and saying, okay, these students need this skill, it's like a puzzle piece. So it's putting it all together and making sure we match it up with the needs.
I guess I was wondering, looking at both of these and seeing how we seem to have a dip, in the middle school group, and wondering, is that, what's going through my mind is trying to understand these percentages and thinking, okay, well, is that a normal, does that happen across other schools? Is it an age group issue? And yet, if this is normed against other schools,
Yeah.
then it would seem to say, no, that's not just a normal thing that happens in middle school. That's something that's happening in our middle school students that maybe we need to take a harder look at to
Yeah.
see why is that happening.
But when you think about the structure that we have in elementary compared to middle, and all the supports when you walk in a elementary school, and you have the tutors, you have the reading coach, you have the math coach, you have the supports, the interventions that students are getting. In middle school, we have that, and that's what we're trying to ramp up to mirror as many supports in the middle school as we do in the elementary school. And so actually next Thursday, there is a volunteer optional professional development for all middle school administrators on the shore to go to Chesapeake College, because we're all talking about what does middle school look like as far as instruction and everything else that we're doing. So unfortunately, all of our administrators here are going, our middle school administrators. So yes, so it's not just us, it's widespread. Middle school, all that comes with it, scheduling, academics, all things middle school. And so we're going to convene next Thursday to start talking about what each of us are seeing and kind of brainstorm what we can do to put some things in place. So now we move from MAP to DIBBLES. So this is, again, K through 2, and it measures, and this has third grade because this extended up to third grade. So this measures your literacy skills. And you could see they take it when they come in, they take it in the middle, and they take it at the end. But correct me if I'm wrong, that there's 2 tests that are different. Like they come in and then the middle one is different than the first time they take it.
They do adapt based off of what is expected. Again, similar to MAP. The other thing is DIBBLES is a much shorter test. MAP is also a short assessment. It's only about 45 to 60 minutes, where MCAP is multiple sessions of 60 minutes. So it's just a snapshot. So that's another thing to consider, where DIBBLES is also another snapshot.
Yeah. And this is overall. Tomorrow or Wednesday, I'll be sharing, because the board goal was 5% of increase for K through 2. That was met, but from beginning to end, this is the students coming in, their skill at or above where they should be. So this is only showing at or above where they should be for each of the grade levels, beginning and then end. So 157 students in kindergarten were at or above where they should be when they walked in the door. At the end of the year, we have 213 kindergartners that are at or above where they should be for kindergarten level.
Is the difference in number new enrollments or students that did not take it at the beginning of the year?
So total, it was 300 and some students took it total. Yep. And so those are and then that's for first grade, and then that's for second grade. Yeah. So if I would put an end, I would have the total number. Yep. Which I probably have on a chart somewhere around here. Yeah. So
then those remaining who are not at or above,
correct.
what, 87 or so? I don't know what that.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do we?
So then that's the plan. So then we take those 80, students, and we look at, okay, what do we need for them going into first grade? Because this is the end of the school year. So now we're looking at each grade, students who are not yet, to prepare for what are we going to do for them coming in. But then they'll take it again in the fall.
So is it about 300 per grade?
Roughly, yeah. I had my chart earlier today. It's about that amount.
For economically disadvantaged, is that based on the McKinney-Vento standard? Is what do we use for those? Oh, it's
Yeah.
farms. Okay.
Yeah. But I can get that number too Wednesday. I'll get the total number for each grade because I have a slide for that for Wednesday, actually, for the board goal. So 10.8 overall gain from beginning to end. The different K1, 2, largest growth there in her Hispanic population with 16%, but all groups demonstrated our growth. But again, just another data point to goes along with our MAP that will go along with our MCAP when we get that score, as well as what they're doing every day in school and in their classwork or any other internal assessments that teachers are using.
Going back one slide, I was curious about how it seems like, so the kindergartners that are coming in at 46%, and then the first graders are coming in only at 40, and then the second graders coming in at only 35.
Mm-hmm.
In each case, they're having a significant gain through the course of the year, which is great. I guess I wonder, what can we do to help with that slippage? Or it seems like slippage. Maybe that's not what these numbers represent.
Yeah, so that's just the 40% of first graders, 40% of them out of the first grade class, all first graders at TCPS. were at or above. At the end of the year, 55% of all of our first graders were at or above where they should be.
Right, but in kindergarten,
but it's-
they were
yeah,
at
like-
46%.
Yep.
And then in first grade at the beginning, they were at 40%. In second grade at the beginning, they were in 35%. So
Yeah,
is
and
it
there's
what's happening
another.
over the summer? Is there anything we can do, or is that not what it's representing?
So these are different cohorts of children, and I think that one of the biggest things to look at with this, which it's not on this slide, we implemented new curriculum. So we did see, it's not uncommon. So we implemented new curriculum benchmark 2 years ago. That was when we saw a slight dip in our performance, which is to be expected when you implement a new curriculum. What we were hoping is that in year 2, once we had our teachers more familiar, our students more familiar with it, that we would see an increase. And I think that that is part of what we're seeing here, because our students, if you were to look at this by cohort of following those first graders, I think that you would probably see, and I've seen it, but I don't remember off the top of my head right now, it was lower when they also had left the previous year. So there's going to be a little bit of a lag from our implementation of benchmark, and now we are starting to see the gains that we were hoping for. So it's different cohorts there. So we're not really seeing a true slippage of 63% of students being at where we expect them to be, and then go down to 40 in first grade. That's a different group of students.
And so the numbers, I quickly looked. So in kindergarten, there were roughly 338 kindergartners who took this. First grade, there were 270 first graders, and in second grade, 295. So that gives you the total number of who took the assessment.
So would we be able to look at, or would it even be valuable to look at, by a given cohort, how they have done each year?
Yes. And so, and right, because, so how will, apples to apples, we want to look on the diagonal to see, or really that way, how they're doing. So then we want to see how will the first graders as second graders start the year off, those same students.
And I do want to just remind the board that we are required, when a student is not through this universal screener showing the progress we would expect, that gets reported to parents. And we also report what intervention we're putting in place for the student. So we're working closely with families to let them know what additional supports are in place for their students, so we can begin to start closing those gaps for students.
And not every parent has to agree to an IEP or a 504, correct?
Well,
Which can impact that.
we have interventions in place that don't require that. So the IEP and 504 are for students who meet specific eligibility requirements. Any student who is not meeting the benchmark that we would want to see here can go into a reading intervention, whether that be UFly, working with our tutors, getting pull-out from our reading teachers in the school. We ensure that every student is getting an intervention to try to address those needs.
Are all of our elementary schools doing the WIN block or the What I Need block yet?
So I think our last school was Tillman, and they are implementing it next year, but they have very small class sizes.
All right. So all of that was priority 2. And I just want to go back, actually, I want to go back all the way here, because you see the 9 strategies here. Some of them are directly linked to the work that's being done with this data. And I'll point out number 2, a plan for multi-tiered systems of support. So I know today, and then last week there was a day where we had a big convening here where people were talking about this rollout of this system. And this is the system where students will be brought to a team where we can then look at the data that you just looked at, but also talk about what's the plan. So what's the plan? What's the intervention? What's the frequency? What's the data? And all the things that are going to be discussed as far as what we're going to do to help students get to where they need to be. But that's just an example of all the strategies that go into what's behind what we're doing with looking at the data. So now we're on priority 2, and this is dealing with our recruiting and retaining our teachers, admin, staff, and you can see the indicators that are attached with this. Again, the dashboard showing that 4 of the strategies are in progress, 2 have been started. Some of this is tied with our blueprint and having teachers being highly qualified. You can see the progress and then the overall progress of the priority. So this is our first year because this is our strategic plan year 1. So we collected the data of qualified staff and the numbers are on the top, the percentages are on the bottom for the number of teachers that have provisionals, who has certified, who's highly qualified, and then admin. So we're going to then begin to track this for the next 3 years per our strategic plan. And then our diversity count at the top and our percent at the bottom. And so we'll continue to have the same layout year after year so that we can compare. And then we'll start to have the years beside each other as comparisons.
So I'm assuming that we have a standardized rubric that difference between a highly qualified staff versus a certified staff.
Yes, and I don't know if you want to speak to the difference of that.
Yes, so when we speak to highly qualified staff, we're looking at someone who's fully certified in the area in which they teach. When we talk about a certified staff person, that person is certified to teach, and a provisional person is a person who's just getting their certification or their license.
And how about experience level?
So that factors in some cases, especially you could have a highly qualified person come in who just graduated. For example, if we hire someone who comes in fully certified in math and we was able to find someone like that this year, it also just depends. Again, someone can be coming from another county, and so those years of experience count differently. But if they're highly qualified and certified in their area, they would be in that group.
And then you also have nationally board certified. And those are the teachers that go through the various criteria to pass to become nationally board certified.
Can I ask, before you move on, can I ask about your retention numbers? I know from our personnel report that retention numbers are pretty high, but do we have like a percentage of retained or something along that line?
So I don't have a percentage,
That's
but
something
looking
we
at
can add.
last year, I think we
Retention
hired about
numbers.
53 teachers this year. 53 teachers the year
25.
before, like my first year, and about 33 this year. So looking at the number, including the number of people we were able to retain, has been good. Also, we've remained steady with the number of retirees. We had 11 last year and 11 this year.
And that's something I've captured so we can then we can start looking at that year to year. And so here are some things that have been done this year and are currently still in the works for attached to this priority. So priority 3 is about student, family, and community engagement. You could see the indicators that are attached to this. And then this next slide will show what the status is as far as the 9 strategies. You could see some of the strategies are complete because some of these are data that has to go to the state. You could see some overlap. You could see number 4 is using an MTSS model. You saw that same work being done in priority number 1. Some have been started, some are in progress, and some are complete for this.
Is the
priority.
top one that says not started, is that
is.
due to us not receiving funding to increase staff, I would assume?
And I'm going to look at, is our priority lead here? Oh.
So yes, that would be positions that were requested in the budget, and then due to funding, we were not able to keep those in the budget.
Just wanted to point that out, that it's not because we're not trying to increase staff, it's because we are not given the funding to increase staff.
So this is the priority that focuses on our local climate survey. Now, if you remember, I guess that was 2 years ago, we were getting, the state gives out a school climate survey, but it's given one time a year, and we usually get it like late, like the fall of the next year. So what we decided to do was to take some of those same questions and give it at the beginning of the year and in the middle of the year, so we can kind of have some comparison data. So what you see are the last 3 years of all the various categories for the student, and then the next slide I'll show will be the staff. So at least you can see kind of where the bars land. Each school then gets this, so they can look at, are we getting better in this area? Are we not? And what we can start to do about it. So it's just good trend data to have that we'll continue to monitor. And so that's the student. This is the staff. Again, a lot of the same categories.
Does this include all of our teachers, and was this the end of this year survey?
This includes, what was that you said? The end of the year survey?
Right, is this our
No,
staff?
this is a separate survey. Wednesday, you're going to get the end of the year survey themes. So improvement, just looking at the bars from beginning of year 2024 to all the way middle of the year 2026, just looking at, where are we starting with blue to the turquoise? Is the bar raising? That's what I'm looking at when I look at this. Favorable responses. The community is the overall topic, but it's participation and engagement, relationship, students to staff, safety, physical safety, substance abuse. And again, that's our survey. Staff favorable, some of the same responses for staff. And then when you get to the state survey, we'll get this year's back, I believe, in the fall, Ms. Spurrier. We'll get it in the fall, so it'll be kind of lag. We'll share it when we get it. But this is the Maryland school survey. You could see it's only one time a year. So we just have 2024, 2025. We'll add 2026 in the fall when we get that. So what schools can do is line up our internal beginning of the year, the last 4 years, and then they can line up the states 24, 25, and they'll get 26 in the fall.
Were there areas in the survey that you saw that you were less pleased with? And did you have ideas about how those could be addressed going forward?
So that's going to be the next step. So we have actually, tomorrow is our first leadership retreat where we're just going to close out the year and celebrate, what do we feel we did well. Then on July 13th and 14th are 2 days of getting down in the weeds with the different departments, all the things that we need to cover. And then we're going to have a fourth one in August to get ready to open up the year. So that's where we'll have the discussions of looking at all of this data that you're looking at now to be able to say, all right, what do we have to put in place? What's our plan? What do we need to do? Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, and so what the teams do, with anyone that's looking at data, they look at those points and then they say, okay, what are going to be those action ones that we're really going to focus on, and then continually monitor through the year. So that's the work to be done. looking at this. So, of course, there'll be more conversations around this as we're kind of resetting what we do around our discipline right now. Has created a spreadsheet that's going to go to all 9 districts on the shore to fill in, so we can have all of our numbers kind of in one place to go along with the resolution work that's being done. So that was just sent out so we can start collecting that data. But we're still tracking our internal data of looking at number of referrals, 24 the last 2 years.
Can I interrupt? Because I
Yep.
know, but I don't know that everybody knows
Okay.
that we are having a good response to the resolution that we passed on
Yes.
discipline.
Yes.
And we have further opportunities to engage with other counties at upcoming conferences in regards to getting more counties signed on to the discipline resolution.
Yes. So it was discussed last week at superintendent meetings, like I said, and we're collecting the data on the shore so we can at least have a bigger picture of the numbers and the data to go along with it. Our attendance, you could see 25, school year 25, and then broken down by quarters of this 2026 year. You could see the different color codes, graduation rates, and then that's on the lag too. So we'll still have to add school year 26 to that.
Do we have, I know you can't speak to specific situations, but do we have any data on what's driving the chronic absenteeism? Is it children with serious medical conditions? Is it children that can't figure out how to get to school or get to the school bus? Do we have any data on what's driving that absenteeism?
So I'm not sure that everybody's aware that when we look at chronic absenteeism, it includes all codes. So even the lawful absences are counted, death and family, illness and whatnot. So we can drill down to the specific reasons for a student's absence. But the challenge with chronic absenteeism is that it includes everything. And it's 10% of the amount of time a student is enrolled. So if we have 180 school days, 18 absences for the year would make a student chronically absent. The other part is it's a constantly moving target, right? Because you can have a student who doesn't have any absences, then gets COVID or the flu and misses a week of school. And depending on when that happens in the school year, that can make them chronically absent right away. So to answer your question, yes, we can drill down. We're really looking at the students as they approach chronic absenteeism and trying to intervene with them and put some things in place for them.
And this is going to be an area that when we do have our teams in our schools looking at MTSS, so when we have a student that's flagged with all the absences, then we'll be able to talk about, so what is this? Is it a student that's home with the flu, or is it more than that we need to dig into?
Ask because I know that's reflected on our school report cards.
When you talk about the illnesses, I would like to see that they're still getting educated with the home nurse or whatever is available.
So we do offer home hospital services, but it's not designed for a student who maybe is missing 3 or 4 days. It's designed for the student that's out for a really extended period of time, because by the time we find a tutor and they start, and the way the law is written in Maryland is we have 10 calendar days to find somebody and get services started. So we do provide those services, but not for those short-term absences.
Okay. And the same thing, like I know some parents are insistent on taking their kid on a vacation. So, that needs to be
And
broken down.
that is one of the things we've talked about. So in our language, in our policy or our AR right now, it has a code for family vacation, and we're sending a very mixed message. Vacation is not a lawful absence. So we are proposing that code be removed. It's an unlawful absence in the eyes of the state.
So basically, like myself last year, I had COVID twice and I had flu once. So if a student just gets sick like that, then that falls into chronic absenteeism.
Yep, and if you throw in there that maybe you've had a death in the family, or, yes, it's not difficult, if a child, but we're also looking at that, right? So if a student has repeated illnesses, then we start to look at, do they need intermittent home hospital services, where we can start to provide services for them on an intermittent basis if we have a doctor authorize that.
So I'm going to ask this question. What is the consequence of the absenteeism?
So we have been very punitive as a state, as a county, for a long time. And what all the research shows is that being punitive does not make a difference in improving attendance. The courts have a very difficult time hearing the attendance cases. They don't want to send a parent to jail or fine a parent. We've tried mediation. That doesn't really make much of a difference. What we found does make a difference is for us to be working with the families and really direct all of our efforts into doing interventions with students early on and getting to the root cause of the absences or the tardies and working with the family to eliminate those barriers.
Because there's no such thing as truancy.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
There's no such thing as truancy.
There is such thing as truancy, but the courts won't take a truancy case when they're 15 or 15 and 2 months. And typically with the younger students, when we take them, oftentimes they get put on the set docket, which means they're just monitoring, and we would take them back. We have just found that our efforts are better spent really doing the interventions.
Don't have I guess that's up to each individual school as to tardies and instituting some kind of consequence, like detentions. I mean, to talk about the absenteeism, I think is fine, but if we don't have the consequence for the absenteeism, it's like, what are we talking about? And maybe that is up to each individual school and principal to say, okay, we're going to have Saturday detentions if you're tardy however many times. Or, I mean, absenteeism, I know we have vacations, we have all that. So I don't know about that. I mean, I think more of is the tardy situation. I know that's a problem.
I think the consequences are falling more on the parent than it is the student.
Well, I think that's a really good point, Ms. Cherry, because at the elementary level, it's really not up to the students oftentimes. It's more of a parent issue, so we try to work at it, by way of the parents. When you get into the secondary level, I will say that, again, our current attendance policy has 6 tardies equals an unlawful absence. So we've got an inflated absentee rate. The state doesn't even acknowledge that. That's something that we're self-imposing. But to answer your question about what we do for the tardies, we do ask that the schools are, they're doing the same thing, right? We're not having each school do their own thing. These students are brought up in MTSS. We talk with them, we work with the family. As it progresses, our student services workers get involved. We access resources in the community, and that's how we're addressing the tardies, because to go after it in a punitive way doesn't really make an improvement, and we've seen our efforts better spent on trying to get to the root cause of it.
When you say punitive, what do you mean?
Like punishing them for being tardy. What we try to do is find out why are they being tardy, and then working with them to stop that.
I don't know. I know that just personally, if there is no consequence, they're going to be tardy.
I do think there are natural consequences when they're tardy to school and they're not here on time, or they're tardy to class.
Can we bring back Saturday detention, after school detention? I think they used to do that.
I think the argument there is if it's like, a kindergartner or a first grader, it's really not their fault if they're late.
Well, I'm hearing a couple of different things. I'm hearing that 6 tardies then equals an unlawful absence, and that's not a state imposed thing. Sounds almost like we're saying that's a self-inflicted wound, because then that goes to our attendance numbers, which then goes to our school rating numbers. So maybe we ought to look at is there something different we ought to do around tardies? You know, maybe there is something that would be more effective than just like, okay, you've had 6 tardies, now you have an unlawful absence. Okay, you know, maybe there's something else. Maybe a detention of some kind would work better, particularly for the older students where it might make a difference.
I mean, I do know for the high school, when the sports are an issue, they are on time because they do not want to miss a game, and the coach institutes that rule. So they do not. They are not tardy for that. So why don't we have the same for the just being on time for our school?
Well, and I do think that when we have students that are chronically tardy, we can look at some other kind of consequence. I think we want to be careful about eliminating them from participating in things, because then you eliminate their connection to school, which only makes the tardy and the absenteeism worse. So it's really a fine line between working with the student and the family and providing consequence. But yes, we can certainly look at some other things. And we will be developing an internal guidance document about, because we're starting to look at attendance in 2 ways. Historically, we've always looked at attendance based on average daily attendance. And now the state is saying, well, that's all well and good, but we need to really start focusing on chronic attendance. When are students approaching that point? When are they at that point? And what are you doing about it? And so we're trying to look at it from 2 different angles. And our counselors closely monitor that, but we will be developing an internal intervention timeline of different things that would be done at different stages of this. And certainly it could include some of the things you're mentioning, Mrs. O'Connor.
I think we discussed some of this on the calendar committee too. I mean, tardiness obviously is a different subject, but again, I'm going back to the vacations. Parents are going to take their day earlier, and it's something we're trying to take into mind when we're doing the calendar. So I don't know if that helps, but we try.
Going back to that, I think we send a very mixed message with our current AR, which is part of why we're changing that, because it even says approving a vacation. We don't have the authority to approve a vacation. It's an unlawful absence. So we're trying to get that, really align our policy with what the state law says.
So is that coming to policy committee soon then?
It's coming.
I think, yeah.
So,
I do also
how,
really-
how does that work? I mean, if a family's going on vacation, they say we're going to Europe for 2 weeks, we'll get all of our work, it's still unlawful. So what?
So, well, and you're right. I mean, we can say it's unlawful. We can't say you're not going to go, and parents are still going to go. But we can't sanction that and say we will excuse it or we will approve it. It's an unlawful absence. So when a parent makes that decision to go, they just need to understand that's an unlawful absence if it occurs during the school year.
I like
That's
the
a
fact
state
that.
law.
Oh, sorry.
That's a state.
I was just going to say that I like the fact that you have the option and the ability to go back and actually drill into the chronic absenteeism, because more of my concern is if a child, a student is chronic absent, how does that affect how they learn? And so when we go back and look at that, I'm less concerned about the 5-day vacation or the 14-day vacation and who's going to have Saturday school. I'm more focused on how does this affect how our kids are able to learn and what type of instruction we're given to those specific kids. Do you think that you will be able to come back at a later time to be able to say if this really impacts some of our students in a certain way?
Yes, I mean, right now we have part of Power School is analytics, and I could pull up the chronic absenteeism part of the dashboard, and I can see who is at risk, who's approaching, and who's chronic. And if I click on the bar, it will give me the names of all the students in that category. And then we can start to look at that. The other thing that we have in place right now is called the CHIPS program. That does not align with state law, because basically what that does is says you're able to have so many absences if you have a chronic illness. We need to be offering student services if they have a chronic illness, not just giving them X number of days. So again, that's another change to the AR. We're doing away with CHIPS, and if a student has a chronic illness that they would have qualified for CHIPS, we need to look at giving them home hospital. which would give them the instruction and the services you're talking about.
Yeah, I think that all of this goes down to what you said in the beginning is looking at what is really the root cause so that the students that need additional support for whatever that may be, some of the situations with attendance and truancy can be logistical issues in a family, when it is that the parents have to report for work and who it is then that is getting the children on the bus. There are many different circumstances. There can be students who are older who have ADHD issues, and how do you teach them how to be on time? There are many different pieces, and then getting to the students where it's not a vacation, it is an illness situation. So I think that's great to potentially look at taking that from being kind of just excused and put aside. Well, if you're having a problem, can you just go get a note from your doctor so that then this won't show up as that situation? I think it's great to be really getting to the root of it.
And I assume that you can see family trends as well.
We can, and we can compare a single student's data from year to year. So, and what we know too is that attendance patterns and behaviors are set in pre-K and K. And so a lot of times our pre-K students might miss, and it's miss school and it's not a mandatory program. That is true, but their patterns and their routines are being set that early. So really trying to do early intervention with them is critical.
Okay. Our fourth priority is aligning our system for success. And so this is on Wednesday, you'll see the themes of feedback from the various departments and schools and the school improvement plan. But this whole priority is about the consistency across what we're doing and the work that we're doing and the coherence, making sure that we are looking at this data with on a cadence, making sure that everyone is putting their action items in place, setting their goals, and that's being monitored. So you could see 7 strategies under this priority. You could see which ones are in progress, which ones have started, where the planning for some of them. But this is just standardizing a lot of things that we do in the organization and making sure that there's guidelines, procedures, all about strong systems for our school district. And then the last one is priority 5, and this is our resources and efficiency. And this goes back to where the money following the schools, following the student groups, and where that falls. And there's 7 strategies under this priority. You could see again the progress that's being made with each of these strategies. And then the chart that shows the percent of areas where minimum funding requirements are met. However, they pushed back the year in which this has to be done. Is it 28, Ms. Jones, now? Yep. So it's now fiscal year 28 where we have to show that the money is meeting where the need is. But you could see where the finance department, Ms. Jones, has done a really good job, a tedious process of finding and making sure the funding is followed. I think that's a repeat of one. So any additional questions? I captured a couple of things. I captured, seeing a student report around MAP data and maybe getting some answers more about how those internal screeners are selected by the state as opposed to others, staff retention numbers, priority 2, and looking at the whole topic of tardies, its connectedness to our learning around that priority as well. Okay, any other?
I think better understanding of our MAP data and understanding what those percentages
I'll capture
represent.
that. And I'll have probably Mr.
I would
Neal
like
come.
to see some data. Since we started this community school funding, what progress have we seen? Since we're pouring more money into it, are we seeing results? And I have a second thing also. This goes to parents who are taking their kids on vacation. I grew up in the military, and we moved a lot. And one principal in 3rd grade in Arkansas said something to me that I will never forget. She said, "You will learn more a week traveling across the country with your family than you'll ever learn sitting in a classroom." So she gave me work to do ahead, and I learned my multiplication tables going across the country. And I think if we would give our kids work to do while they're going, it would keep the education stream going.
Yeah, I feel like it's not those students that we're worried about, like the ones that are going on vacation, right? I mean, I think it's the chronic ones that are missing school. So they're missing education, they're missing time in school. Because if they're not in, they're not missing. And those are the ones that I feel, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like those are the ones we're more worried about. And then you get into the Edmentum whole thing at the end of the year, where teachers are having to give that test because they're skipping, they're not coming. And I don't know what the true consequence is for those students. I don't see that we have one. So I don't know what, if you don't have the consequence, I don't know how we're going to grow.
Okay, any other comments on this topic?
Yeah, I have a couple of quick things.
Okay.
I believe the MAP scores actually has the national benchmark, so you'll be able to compare your own individual child. I'm wondering if it has a national benchmark so you can compare the actual schooling, so that may be helpful when you present that information to the board, because I think we're asking where do we fit in compared to everyone else. And then, I don't know, this might be a Dr. Einhorn, Dr. Warner question. When we looked at the MAP data, and it has the growth middle of the year and then it has the end of the year, we saw in a lot of the grades, especially in the middle school, but there wasn't a lot of growth from middle of the year to end of the year. I'm wondering if there's any correlation, if we see the same information in the actual schoolwork in the classroom. I think that's one thing. And secondly, are we able to look at that to see if there's something, not with the children, not with our students, but actually in the instruction? Is it working? Are we teaching the right things between the middle of the year to the end of the year? Maybe we're teaching the right things, but maybe the effectiveness of the learning, the strategies, maybe something is off there to not see so much growth.
Maybe it's specific classrooms too.
So, and that's a good point. And I think it goes to Ms. Joyce, what you were saying, when you keep asking the 5 whys, well, why, and you keep peeling back, trying to get right to that root cause of what some of the things that we're seeing.
All right, then we're going to move on to the next topic, which is the food service management with Mrs. Jones.
Good evening. I just wanted to I don't know if there is a slide here. There might be one. Okay. A bit of an update. We are in the process of finalizing our contract with Aramark, our new food service company, and MSDE needs to approve that, so we're waiting on that. We are very much in the we're very happy to report that the majority of Sodexo employees did sign on with Aramark. I believe we've signed 32 of 34 employees. So that occurred over the last 2 weeks. We have some training days picked out in summer for them to learn some additional skills and learn the sort of the Aramark way of doing things. And what we're in the process of doing right now is we had the YMCA started meal service today, but we believe we'll be providing meals not only for our 2 summer school sites, but for the YMCA in St. Michael's, the YMCA in Easton. That includes the Camp Lazy Days program. We'll be partnering with local community partners we work with a lot, with BAM, with Neighborhood Service Center, who do summer programming. And we are doing those weekly meal pickups on Thursdays that We started last year. And so the first one of those will be next, not this Thursday. We kind of needed some time to get everyone signed up. But starting next Thursday, Sodexo will do the first of those, and then Aramark will continue with for the next 7 weeks. So we're really excited about all of that. It's a lot to get a new service company set up because they don't know anything about our schools. They don't know what time they can accept deliveries, or just it's a big learning curve. So in terms of recruiting, their senior leadership here on site, we have a good prospect to be our general manager, and then they'll start interviewing for a chef manager. So that's sort of where we are with that. We're really excited.
It's great. Thank you. I just wanted to give a shout out. I hear at home about the cafeteria team at the Easton Middle School and how much they care about what they serve and how they prepare and provide food to the students and staff at the middle school. So I just wanted to give them a shout out.
And that's great to hear. And they should be there next year as well. I also wanted to thank Sodexo. They've really handled this transition very well. They've been, thinking forward about things that need to happen, and they've been really good to work with. So I really appreciate their assistance with the transition.
Any other questions on food service or comments? Okay, the next topic is the budget, again with Mrs. Jones.
So the next 4, if you click that, we're going to go through various presentations. The first one will be the budget. The next will be weapons detection, which will be part of where do we go next. Then Mr. Schaefer will go over educational facilities and the virtual day. All 4 of these will show up Wednesday as consent agenda items.
Great. So we're at that final stretch where we're going to present in a consent agenda for you for voting on Wednesday night, the final adjustments to the 2027 budget. Just trying to refresh the board. We've had some updates. Officially, what you've approved at this point is the version of the budget that happened in February. We did some pretty detailed suggested cuts and changes in a late April special board meeting work session. And the board seemed amenable to those suggested changes, but there were some questions up in the air. So we're at the point now, and I had a little bit of an update on some revenue for you last month. So we're at the point now where we have all the pieces, and we just need to fit them together. So I wanted to call to your attention, our original budget was that you passed was a request to the county council for $92.3 million. That was our total budget, which included a request to the county council for their piece. And that included $10.6 million over and above required minimum local share to the county council. We received our final budget appropriation notification a few days after the county council voted on May 27th. And our final appropriation from the county is $57.4 million. That includes $1.8 million of capital funding we'll talk about in a little bit. It does include a little bit over required minimum local share. We'd asked for the $10.4 million. They have granted us $569,000. And what that $569,000 represents is $400,000 toward weapons detection and $169,771 of other. And last month in May, when I presented to you that we had received notification that some of our formulas had changed and we were expecting a decrease in our funding, particularly in pre-K and special ed, I said and that was in excess of $200,000. I said, let's hold on and let's see if we can't maybe figure out a way to save some of this money. So there were some conversations between us and the county staff, and they said that they would honor the original level of funding the state had projected for us, which meant they were giving us $169,771 over what ultimately the state came up with as a final calculation. So we do appreciate that. This slide shows in, and I don't have, is this it's the bottom white, right? There we go. In these two columns, these three columns, so this is local, meaning for the most part, it's the appropriation from the county council. This is state, and this is our total for the year. These are where we are proposing some differences in our revenue for our final revenue. So the first two are driven by those decreases in funding in the funding formulas. That's $132,000. Here is something we discussed back in April. Based on our projected enrollment in non-public placements next year, we don't think we will have the level of expense originally intended in the 2027 budget or the revenue related to that. So they offset each other to a certain extent. And then this is that decrease between the $10.6 million we originally requested from the county council and what they ultimately approved. So about $10 million. And that's summarized here. We started with a revenue budget of 92.3. The county council decreased what we requested over and above what they had to fund us by $10 million, 10.1. Some adjustments to state and local aid. Us deciding that our estimate for non-public tuition revenue should come down. And finally, this final piece, this light always takes a while to come on, sorry. That's it, sorry. The difference between the cuts that we were able to make and the funding that we will be getting nets to this $2,650,000. And that means our total adjustments to our budget would be $7.8 million. I know there's some questions. What is in this $2.6 million? Is it all non-recurring? No, it's not very much non-recurring, to be honest. And I know I've said that to you, and I appreciate that you've taken that to heart, that it's not ideal to be using fund balance to be funding recurring cost. But we're at a point now where, and we've been at a point where we've really cut as lean as we can cut, short of making other deeper cuts. And the board did not seem inclined to make those deeper cuts. So this is what it's going to take to get us across the finish line. Does that make
You
sense?
spell out more specifically what we're using the fund balance for?
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's really a math thing. Here's our revenue from the state and local. Here are all of our expenses. After cuts, there's a shortfall still of $2.6 million. So, I mean, you could look at it a few ways. Are there some non-recurring or unusual items in our budget this year that we could say, are being paid with the fund balance? Yes. I mean, it's a little bit of an unusually high year for certain technology costs just because of the cycle, not because of the recurring student technology, but more the infrastructure. We just have quite a few buildings, and we've talked about that are getting new access points and other structural things. Does that mean next year we won't have a similar number? I don't know, because I don't know for certain. I have a feeling this was higher than it's been in the past. So could we point to certain non-recurring things? Yes. Does that mean, the fact of the matter is, you'll see this at my end slide, our overall budget has gone in between unrestricted and restricted has gone up either 2.2 or 2.4%. We'll get to that slide toward the end. We gave our staff increases of 5.25%, our teachers. So, and there are other things that increased at a greater rate than 2.4%. So that's kind of where we needed to meet.
Mr. Schaefer, can you speak to the increased cost on fueling the buses with the higher gasoline prices?
Not in great detail, but yes, we are seeing increased costs in fuel, obviously, across the board. Now, we do piggyback on the state of Maryland contract for fuel, correct, Ms. Jones? So we do benefit from that, a less of a fluctuation with current market rates, but there are increases factored into that as well. So I can come back with more information if you would like in a later board meeting.
How
We did. I apologize. I should have brought that with me. I did speak with my staff and we did a little investigating and we did look at our prices. They are going up. Fuel as a percentage of our budget is minuscule, but that is certainly an example of inflation that's not 2.4%. So you're right. And healthcare costs, I mean, that's a great example of something that's not 2.4%. And we did not cut or change our benefits to our staff. So
what you're saying is if we weren't using this fund balance, we would be looking at some seriously difficult things.
yes.
I have a question. Since the state has cut our funding, what if we have non-funded mandates? What is the punishment?
I guess it depends on the mandate. Depends on the mandate.
Like if we had to make cuts in the community schools or cuts somewhere, what would the punishment be from the state?
Well, I mean, the state always has the ability to withhold more funding from us. If we aren't, I won't, and then let me rephrase that. The state can have the ability to withhold funding from us. It depends on what the requirement is. So many things, some things baked into the blueprint have this hook. If you don't do this, we reserve the right to withhold some of your funding. The state does not want to go there. I've heard that from Chairman Leggett several times in person, online, in meetings. They don't want to do that, but that is a hook that they have.
But they're doing it already.
Well, their formulas for a few of the formulas went down in the per pupil amount. Some went up. Part of our funding decrease is based on a slightly declining enrollment or a change in enrollment. One of the things that hit us late that was unexpected was the legislature did change who they wanted to fund in pre-K. We don't differentiate, discriminate. We don't set any kind of barrier for students entering pre-K other than, coming to an area school, like normal school enrollment procedures. We have universal pre-K. We don't charge families for pre-K. And they decided, it was kind of I felt like it was an interesting decision. They decided not to fund us for some of the students. Yet if those students qualified for special ed services, we still have to provide all the special ed services, but we may not even be paid for the children. So
With the national board certification, how many teachers are doing that next year or are in process as well?
we do track that. I don't know the number. I don't know the number, and it varies. I mean, you've got some that are this far and some that are this far. So there's a continuum there's 4 modules they need to pass, and I don't know how many are necessarily up for could be up for consideration next year, and it all depends on them and what they submitted. So I think they would have already submitted for next year. It's determination in December. I think they would have already submitted all of their work for that, but I don't know, and I don't know if Ms. Warner knows yet.
So that's correct. We don't always know. There's a lag because the scores must be, or the components must be turned in June, and then we don't receive the scores, or the candidate doesn't receive the scores until early December. So and then it's not uncommon for teachers to sometimes have to redo a component. So we don't always know. Also, some teachers there are 4 components that are required. Some do it in 1 year, some do it in 2 years, some do it in 3. So it's hard for us to always predict of how many teachers will do it each year because we open it to everybody. They don't have to sign up until October. So it's very hard to budget because in theory, all of our certified teachers could apply and start working on that. And we would have to pay our share of it. The state pays 2/3. We have to pay a third. I will say that in the beginning, we had a significant jump in teachers. We had gone from 2 NBC teachers to, I think we started with over 40 who were interested, and then that kind of dwindled down. But it fluctuates year to year. Now we kind of average having anywhere between like 10 and 15 who are actively in the process.
And to tag on to
Incredibly rigorous program.
And to tag on to what Ms. Warner said, she was referring to the fact that we pay the cost of teachers going through that program. The state contributes some, we contribute some. But in terms of the actual 10 to, the extra compensation they receive, there is a lag, and our negotiated agreement with our union says that we will pay in the year we get our funding. So there is not a situation where we're paying someone who's earned, been notified, say in December. We wait until the following school year, which is for them to start earning that. And that's when we're paid as well, or when we receive the funding.
Is there any piece of this where if a teacher goes through this and Talbot County has paid for part of the expense, that they have to stay teaching in Talbot County for any period of time after they complete it, or no?
No, the only thing, they sign an MOU every year that the state makes, and there are different MOUs depending on if they're renewing, because they also have to renew as well, which is another cost for us. They are not, because it's a state program. So what that is actually a problem sometimes, because if we were to have teachers that come in from other counties that already have NBC, we might not have budgeted that. So that's another lag in the system of if teachers are going county to county. So they're not held to that. What they are held to is they must attempt all 4 components within 4 years. If they do not do that, then they owe us the money, but they're not required to earn the certification. They just must make the attempt.
With this budget, are we going to be able to meet the 60,000 for starting teachers?
We are. I think we're at 60,200 ballpark, give or take. Yeah. Yes, we've met it. And that was why there was a big increase this year, was to get us over that final $60,000 hump. Okay, so any more questions on fund balance before I move on to other adjustments? So I wanted to point out that our final recommended budget of $84.5 million is an increase over last year of $3 million. It does include the use of $2.6 million worth of fund balance. But keep in mind, we also use some fund balance in the current year. So the fund balance we're using next year is $1,083,000 more than we used this year. So we used 2.5 and change in fund balance this year.
What is our remaining fund balance?
I believe it is $8 million coming into the year, and I believe we will not be contributing at all to it. And we are really operating at break even as of today, June 15th. We're really operating at break even for the year, which is a good thing. I mean, we wanted to get really close, and we're really close.
That's something you guys are excellent at, and I really appreciate you.
Thanks. Okay, so we talked about this when we first went through these in April. We left no stone unturned is really what this is trying to say. We really re-examined everything, and we went through those with you. This says in May. It actually was at a late April meeting right before May. So our final recommendations would be to cut expenses by $7.8 million. And here's how we recommend doing that. This looks a little different from the way we showed it to you recently, but there were 20 positions originally proposed, and that has been cut to 9 positions. I'm sorry, because I had the other positions up there. I'm not sure where they went. But they're the same. There's been no change to this recommendation since the April board meeting. So the remaining, the way that shakes out, that was the biggest single area of cost savings, perhaps. So within the admin budget, we found some ways to make some changes, one of which the number one item was to eliminate one of those 20 positions, and then just a little here and a little there by reducing contracted services and reducing some travel, some things like that. So about $93,000 from the administration budget. Mid-level administration, which is all the principals, assistant principals, curriculum folks. We have $128,000 worth of adjustments, which would bring that budget down to $6.3 million. Just stop me. I'm going to go through these. There's about 8 more departments to go through. So if you have any questions on these slides, please just stop me. In instructional salaries, that was the bulk of the new positions. So that's eliminating those six of those 20 proposed new positions and just slightly tweaking stipends to teachers for out of the school day work that they do. That would bring that budget down to $32.6 million. Under materials of instruction, very little change there, about $57,000. For other instructional costs, which is where we have things such as all of our software and our contracted services, the folks that we work with, as well as the instructional hardware, we have $708,000 worth of proposed adjustments. The biggest item there is hardware and using some E-rate grant money to help pay for those items, and or there's really not much of a change to the items. It's really like finding the grant funding to pay for them. Under the special ed budget, we would be reducing that by $646,000 to $8.8 million. That had previously had a new position proposed in it. We did recently, Ms. Menchez found out we would be getting a grant we did not think we would be getting renewed. So that took care of some IA positions. As I mentioned at the start when we were talking about revenue, we've revised downward our non-public tuition expense and revenue. This is the expense piece. And the Midshore Special Ed Consortium that we work with very closely and are a member of came back to us with a revised budget at the request of the counties that participate in that. Student services, really just eliminating one of the pieces of software they use. They have found a replacement that works better for their needs, and just some other small changes, bringing that budget to $475,000. Transportation, the big change there was something we talked to you about in April. We'd sort of been double dipping unintentionally. We changed how we did our salary budget this year and realized that we were accounting for not only full-time salaries for bus drivers for the vacant positions, but also for their subs. And so I really was sort of double counting some of that, if that makes sense. I didn't need to account for that in both places. So we revised those estimates. We cut our summer school transportation budget back down to something more comparable to previous years. That has fluctuated up and down a little bit throughout this budget cycle. We feel like we've landed on the right number. We had a passenger van in our transportation budget, and we think we have a grant that we can use to cover that. And we would like to prepay this year in the next couple weeks one of our bus payments for next year that would be due next year. Just go ahead and pay it at the very end of this year. It's due in July, by the way, so we're really just prepaying it by a month. Plan operations, big change there was to revise the weapons detection equipment budget from 800,000 down to 400,000. So that is a savings of 400,000. We're going to hear a little more about that tonight. And then we have some reserves at MABE that can help us offset our the payments we make into the group insurance trust. And so we're going to plan to do that for next year. That gets us a revised plan operations budget of 5.5. And then we're on to our last budget category for reduction, and that is fixed charges. And there are some big numbers in here. Actually, these are the biggest numbers, not the savings from the positions. So first of all, we talked about how at a very late date, we were allowed to use the final bit of our ESSER funding again. And they said we could use that. So we're using that to pay for all of our marathon clinic operating costs for next year. It does. It does. It does. Very happy news. We saved a lot of money in our health insurance increase. At one point, this was, 9%. And then we got the quote unquote wonderful news, Dr. Horsey and I, that it was 7% or something. And we're like, yeah, that's not wonderful news. That's not. So give us wonderful news. So we were able to get that down a bit further. Same thing with the workers' comp fund. That's a self-insured plan. We make contributions into it. We have some reserves there. We're going to use that to offset the contributions we have to make next year. That saves us money. As for the OPEB contribution, we have two options here. My suggestion, or I apologize, our suggestion is that we take it out of our operating budget. It's not a mandatory thing that we make this contribution. We've been doing it to try to get our OPEB balance up. And I think what we could do is either we do not have at this point the ability to prepay it. We don't have the room in this year's remaining budget to prepay it, is my estimation. If at the very end of the year we do, something comes up and we're able to prepay $50,000, maybe we'll do that. But I suspect any contribution we would make next year might come out of some reserves we have at the ESMIC Health Alliance. And we do have some reserves there. So that might be a decision we talk through with the board at a later point, unless the board is adamant they know they want to do something. But I think we might want to investigate that a little further. And there's no time sensitivity to us making a decision on that now, other than it needs to come out of our budget for next year. So OPEB contribution stands for other post-employment benefits. It's a retirement. It's not a retirement. It's a health plan for our retirees. And so every retiree that is a Talbot County retiree that has coverage with us, their claims are paid out of that plan, if you will. We buy coverage through Labor First, certain types of coverage. There's Medicare coverage in some instances, but ultimately it's the responsibility of TCPS to fund our retirees' health insurance costs.
Excuse me, but don't retirees get Medicare?
They do. So, and they pay their own Medicare, but there's still a piece that we pay. And the Medicare that they're paying for is
So the 20%.
it's the 20% difference. It's the gap. So we're paying the gap. So we have a policy for the gap, but yeah. So there's that. We also one of the ways we could reduce our fixed charges is to reduce our health insurance budget and use some of those reserves we have at the ESMIC Health Alliance to pay into Care First and cover some of the premiums for us next year. And we have adequate reserves to do that. So that would be my recommendation. But that $1 million is in all probability a must do, whereas the OPEB contribution is a could do, a nice to do. So I think the reason I'm suggesting we come back and talk about OPEB later is our reserves at the Esmic Health Alliance are based on claims that come in and eat down our reserves, as well as investment performance. So we might need to dig into that a little more. We don't want to be taking, necessarily $1.5 million out of those reserves, right? Because that would take us to a point where we wouldn't have significant reserves left. And then finally, that final $415,000 is the result of those 11 positions we're talking about eliminating. There are associated fixed charges with those. So that brings us to a total of $4 million in cuts and a total fixed charges budget of around $19 million. All said and done, that brings our total budget to $84.5 million, and that is cutting that $7.8 million that we needed to cut. Now our revenue and our expenses match. This is just a different way of looking at our expenses from year over year. You'll see here, this is what we're proposing now. This was our original ask. So we went from the 92.3 to the 84.5.
We'll vote on this Wednesday via consent agenda.
Correct.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions around these budget items tonight?
I have a couple things I just need to really quickly go through. In addition to the unrestricted budget that's funded through state funding formulas, we do get well over $8 million in grant funding, and that's very much a part of how we deliver services to our students. We need that grant funding. That grant funding is projected to go down next year, but sort of this is the other side of some of the cuts that we just were talking about. I mentioned a transportation grant. I mentioned that Ms. Menchez found some special ed funding. So this is sort of the impact of a few of those changes on our restricted grants. And then there were two things. That $150,000 is the grant that came through this spring for the scoreboard at Easton High School. That is the piece that was approved for this fiscal year. And then finally, Education Foundation, when we looked at what they awarded in the current fiscal year, we felt comfortable bumping up our expected grants from them next year, but no guarantee. None of the grants are guaranteed. So that brings our restricted operating budget to $9 million. And the thing I just want to point out on this screen is there's the $9 million of grants. There's the $84 million of unrestricted funding, and it's a total operating budget of $93.7 million. That's a $2.2 million increase, or 2.4%. And again, that goes back to that does not overall. That's very consider the vast majority of our budget. The biggest item in our budget are the salaries and benefits, and they saw a big increase. There are 4 other funds, and these are one slide each. So these are really quick, but they're part of the budget that you need to pass. Capital budgets you are familiar with. We have the Easton Middle School roof replacement, which is getting funded from state and local. We have some minor repairs, capital repairs at this building, $42,000, also related to roofing and infrastructure. And then finally, there's the scoreboard at Easton High, which has a not to exceed cost in our estimation of $300,000, all funded by the state.
Did we not conditionally approve the funding for that scoreboard based on fundraising and grants, so that we aren't paying for that out of pocket? Wasn't that what we talked about?
Well, we did. And sorry, let me get back. Later, with discussions with Senator Mounts, he indicated that the General Assembly wants to fully fund this project. So that is what they want to do. There is the potential for a little bit of revenue from the scoreboard. So I would like to see maybe some advertising revenue start to come in. I'm going to be talking with some folks about that. So there's the debt service fund. This is just something we record. It's kind of like a nominal thing we put on our books. but we don't really pay. And this is what the county pays on our behalf for all the capital projects they've funded in the past, the big school renovations and things like that. But it's a cost to them, and it's part of their consideration when they're figuring out how much they're going to fund us. So it's important for us to know that. The food service fund, by definition, anything related to food service, so all the money we receive, whether it's from families or from government funding for the meals that we serve, is segregated into a separate fund. It has to run at a profit. It cannot run at a loss. We definitely have a profit. So we are, at the end of last year, we had almost $2 million in fund balance there. And no, we cannot use that in our operating budget. Finally, the trust and agency fund, and that's where if we have organizations or entities on which we sort of keep the books for them, this is money in accounts that have our name on them, but it's not really our money. They do give us a budget. We do administer all the activity of the Midshore Special Education Consortium, meaning their staff are our staff, they're on our payroll, they get our raises, etc., and then we get reimbursed for that. So that is it. That's the final end all be all. Totally open for questions or comments or.
So for the summer programs, does TCPS pay for the food for all of those summer programs, like the BAM, the YMCA?
There's no money that goes back and forth between, I don't want to say it that way. No. First of all, much of the summer food, especially in the town of Easton, is 100% free of charge to students and is fully reimbursed. If we served enough meals, we would make a profit. We don't serve enough meals to make a profit, but that's okay. That's kind of all baked into the pricing that Aramark designed for us. They understand they're not going to make any money in the summer. We're going to lose money in the summer, and that's okay because we make enough money the rest of the year. And remember, maybe from the presentation that I gave to you, Aramark has guaranteed we'll make a $350,000 profit next year, and that includes the summer meals, the meals that we serve all throughout the year. So they look at that all from July 1 to June 30. We will make a $350,000 profit.
You mean from families paying for lunches? From that? I don't
Well-
understand how we're making a profit.
Well, we will make a profit, and then there are other costs we do have to allocate to that. So, for example, I spent 45% of my time this spring on this. 25% of my salary gets charged to the food service fund. I have 2 people that work for me that spend a lot of their time related to food service activities, their salary. So that $350,000 helps to pay for their salaries. And that's why the accounting department operates with 4 people in it for a county this size, because 3 of us have our salaries picked up in some way, shape, or form by the food service fund. So back to your question, because I think your concern is probably around what are we charging our families? Yeah. In the 6 years I've been here, we've raised meal prices one time by 10 cents. So from 2019 to 2026, we've raised our prices 10 cents. I mean, I refused to raise them until this year. And for next year, I said, all right, I'll raise it another 10 cents because we're getting to the point now where we're falling behind other local districts. And I don't think that's necessarily appropriate either. But it's $2.90 for a pretty big lunch. It's a pretty fair price. It's a very fair price. I'll say that. We get so that the student is and the pricing is also designed so that families are not paying for the whole meal. We get other funding for any paid meal from the federal government. It's subsidized, if that makes you feel better.
Okay, anybody else on budget? No? Okay. Mr. Schaefer, take it away.
Thank you, Vice President Dodson. Good evening, members of the board. And so I want to just start real quick by thanking Dr. Papakai. She, in a very busy time of the year, has continued to have this be a focus of my time to make sure that we're moving this, this project forward. Also, given the limitations of funding, which we're all aware of, I'm coming to the board with a recommendation tonight. Well, first an update, but also a recommendation on a pilot program that I would like to see move forward. So, going back a few months now, the focus group that we brought together to review weapons detection systems reviewed 3 nationally notable systems. One of them was this Open Gate weapons detection system. Of the 3, it was ranked second during that time that we had the focus group review. And so basically this system was a more of a traditional metal detector system. It did not have an AI component, therefore it was much less expensive. So, given the funding limitations, I would like to move forward with a pilot program at Easton High School Stadium where we implement the weapons detection systems with partnering with the sheriff's office. And the reason for that recommendation is listed there in the bullets. Large national provider, it's affordable option, no recurring fees, high throughput, and very portable and easy setup. It's kind of made for this type of an application. It's also used in school buildings, and it would be something that moving forward in a tight budget scenario, we may be able to look at expanding and using in the school buildings themselves if it is successful at Easton High, at the stadium. So, so with that being said, I did provide a 1-page summary for the board in board docs that kind of breaks down the highlights of the system itself and how it kind of compares to the other stuff that we looked at, important limitations and key strengths. Obviously, one of the key strengths is the cost, and it is something that allows us to add a layer of security to the stadium and potentially eventually the schools that would support the layered approach that we're looking at implementing. So, all that being said, the vendor that we've looked at 2 vendors that provide this type of a system, and this is the less expensive of the 2, and they do have a TIPS cooperative purchasing contract that we could utilize, and 2 units with the equipment, accessories, training, and shipping would cost us $49,000 and change. The 2 units, because it's such a high throughput, are probably going to be a little bit excessive for the stadium, but I would rather have that than let it be restrictive and cause a problem for implementation. So, so I can answer any questions that the board may have with this recommendation related to the purchase of this system, or in general, what our approach is going to be moving forward for the weapons detection.
Will they be
options that we
moved
have out there.
inside when it's not a stadium event? When there's not an event?
I'm sorry, Ms. Dotson, what was that?
Will these units be moved inside if there's not an ongoing stadium event, or will they just be permanently fixed at the stadium?
So, because there are, the Maryland Center for School Safety has that interim report that was out related to weapons detection systems. And this type of system was reviewed in that. And one of the challenges with this system is going to be staffing. There will be a requirement that that we have staff dedicated to this process. At the stadium, because we pay the sheriff's office to be there already for stadium events, and I'm really talking about football here, we're going to have the staff there, and this is something that we can kind of test out and see how it will work. And also, with the idea that our staff is also going to be trained, and it may be something that that we may be able to handle as well, so that it cuts down on that cost of having additional deputies there. Once again, kind of dipping our toe into the weapons detection system process for a relatively affordable price.
It's weather safe.
Yes, that's one of the strengths of this. It is a low cost, low infrastructure, waterproof system that is battery operated. So there's no electrical infrastructure that we have to have. and it's more like it's a very portable system, which is one of the things that we're really kind of trying to look at. As I said, this is a large national provider. They're used in professional sporting arenas. They're used by government entities, and they're also used widely across the nation by schools as well. So, in fact, Wacomico County is putting out I just heard today, is putting out an RFP for this very system. So they may be adopting it as well.
And I'm assuming we've discussed the various options with law enforcement.
Yes, law enforcement did take part in the focus group that we had a few months ago, and I've also talked to the sheriff's office about training and being part of this. Should we get it approved, being part of the training so that their officers would be, fully trained and capable of operating on the first event that we have.
Now, I do believe the National Center for School Safety is issuing a final report of all of what they've been working on in December.
They will be issuing that report in December. I guess the idea is, based on the funding limitations that we have, there's really not a great alternative to this system. This is a very affordable system, very reliable system. Now, the AI aspect to weapons detection is really it's pricing us out of those options. So that part of that report, to Dr. Pepikai's point, I think, is it does review each of the types of systems, and they're going to give final recommendations on that. It will not give recommendations on specific products, though. It's just types of weapons detection systems.
So I say that to say, this is a recommendation and an option to put something on the table versus not having anything at all. Because I know we went back and forth to expensive ones, and so after the committee talked about, this was a recommendation that we wanted to come forward with as to try out to maybe see the report that comes in December, and then for future planning if we wanted to move to something else or stay with what we have.
I've not been out to a football game for a little while, so I don't know what the signage is like. Are we going to need to update all that and make it clear to parents who like to carry a penknife in their pocket, and how that's going to be addressed?
Yes, absolutely. That's a good point. And so signage is something not part of this purchase, but we would be responsible for operations. We would make sure that we have the necessary signage, and there would be a public announcement so that everybody's kind of aware, so that we don't have those issues, or we can minimize the issues moving forward.
They'll have to get cleared every time they leave the area. Do I have to go back through it? I've got to get something.
Yes, yeah, and typically we don't allow people to generally leave the events. We try to minimize that, especially students. Once they're in, they're in.
And what about the other options that we had? The Zero Eyes. What happened with that?
Yeah. So as I kind of started with, Talbot County Public Schools is looking for a layered approach to safety and security. So we have implemented secure vestibules. Obviously screening that takes place with that, access controls. We've implemented the window film on all of the exterior windows in all of our buildings. If we move forward with this, then we would have weapons detection at least at the Easton High School Stadium, and maybe looking to expand. And so what you're referring to, Ms. O'Connor, is another layer, a separate system, completely different. And that is something that I am going to, with Dr. Pepikai's direction, and once again, because it's a priority for the board, is reconvene that focus group and look at the weapons detection systems through security cameras in the various options that there are. So Zero Eyes is one vendor. There are multiple vendors that provide that service with a little twist to each one. And to be fair, from a procurement perspective, we want to kind of review each one of those that are available. So that is something that I'm planning to do this summer, and then move forward with.
Thank you. So what does this exactly look like? This
So
what
if you
this one.
if you
Like
pull up,
can you walk through the game like if like you said at the football game?
yeah. So if it's available in the board doc, so I did provide a product brochure that kind of shows you what it looks like. But basically, it's just two pillars that are not connected, but they're spaced appropriately and calibrated. And so you would literally just walk through two plastic pillars that are about 4 feet tall, and it would just signal, if this person had there actually has a little, there's different sensitivities and different options, but it gives a green if you're good, a red if they detect something from your knee up, and a yellow if they detect something from the knee down. So basically that every person that would walk through would get screened like that. And then if you do flag, then that's where the sheriff's office would become involved, and there's a wanding process that they would go through.
If we decide to go forward with this, what's the implementation timeline?
So, good question. And 4 to 8 weeks. If we ordered it by July 1st, 4 to 8 weeks, it would be here. Now, they've told me that it would be more closer to the 4 week. And then after that, it's just a matter of getting trained, because they're literally a 5-minute setup. So we should be good by the September, whatever, the first week in September, the first game. And may even be good for the first scrimmage, which is a little earlier than that.
I actually saw this system in use recently at an event I was at, and it was very quick and painless.
Could they be moved to the doors of Easton High School when there's not a game going on?
So they could, and that's really the idea, is that we could use these now. In order to use them at the doors, this is why we want to have a pilot program. Number one, it's going to require more than two streams. It would require probably 4 or 5 for the Easton High School building, but also it's going to require a significant amount of staffing, and that's really what we're wanting to see. How easy is this to manage from a staffing perspective? So that's where we're going to, utilize this as a pilot program and then look to expand if it goes well.
So potentially, if we put it in a school building, we could have SROs and school security staff running it, like when people are coming in, maybe?
Yes. So definitely, maybe not the SROs, because that's kind of outside their scope, but school security staff. And then it would require additional staff to participate. So that is something that we would have to tackle, and what that would look like, whether it's, administration helping with that. But as you all know, you picture Easton High School, there's traffic, there's traffic duty, there's kids in the cafeteria, bus, so there's lots of responsibilities. And to add that, even the company says that this is something that you would not want to do at the start of the school year. This is something you want to implement mid-year once routines are already set. And so once again, I think this is a good way for us to kind of, dip our toe into it and see if this is something that would work for us.
So thinking through the year, budget-wise, we were allocated like $400,000 from the county council for weapons detection. So this is coming from that and is a portion of that. So is the idea that we would evaluate later on in the year and potentially purchase additional detection equipment throughout the
Yes.
year as we see what works and what staffing needs and training needs are?
That's correct. That is ultimately the kind of the end game for this process. Now, we might see that this is not for us, and we continue to just use this at stadium or, extracurricular events, which is what what several school systems are doing now with a system like this. It is a heavy lift to do this for main entry points at schools, and that's why you only have, roughly 3 jurisdictions doing it every day.
I mean, you continually see stories in the news about students bringing weapons to school. There was a story just last week out of Chesapeake, Virginia, where an 11-year-old brought a loaded gun to school. So this is something that is actively happening. I see it in the news regularly.
Yeah, and yes, 100%. This does happen nationally. I just want to stress that it is, and I don't want to downplay any kind of security threat like that. But in a holistic way, this is a really infrequent thing that happens. And what I want to challenge the board to kind of be thinking about, like, it's one thing to be doing this at extracurricular events. It is also another thing to do it at the high schools and middle schools. It is a whole nother thing to do it at elementary schools, because you will be wanding first graders, that have something that hits. So you just have to, I just want to make sure that our heads is fully wrapped around what this might look like and what this might require.
I know the scope is not currently elementary schools, but
We wish this weren't so, right? We really wish this weren't so in our world. I mean, it breaks my heart to think that, okay, we have to spend this much money to address this. And yet, when I think about, the risk and the responsibility to keep students safe, that you have to figure out, because that is the reality. As you say, it's rare, but yet, every time it happens, we say, well, could never have imagined this happening here, right? Everybody says that. And so it's just a very sad thing that we have to worry about that, but I think we do.
Yeah, the other thing that I would add to this is, once again, kind of talking about the layered approach. Ms. O'Connor's question about the weapons detection through the security cameras. So everything with school safety comes down to time. So what is your response time should something happen? And so we may find that a system like that meets the board's requirements as far as a weapons detection system, because when you're using AI through the security cameras, many of the national events, you have visibility of a weapon prior to entering the building. So just like Centegix, we're implementing solutions like that to reduce the response time, because obviously time is of the essence if you have a real situation come up. And there's also, lots of data out there about, and even the MCSS report states that the weapons detection system is not foolproof. There are workarounds, and most real incidents that have happened in schools nationally are not coming through the front door, and they are not caught by a weapons detection system. So we just need to keep all that in mind and balance the real cost of a system like this versus, the operational cost, I guess, if that makes sense. So.
anybody else? No? Okay. I think you're still up, Mr. Schaefer.
Yes, and so I'm not going to confuse it, but before I advance, I know that the one issue that was important to the board was in previous discussions was equity across schools. So I did provide a second quote that would include a third unit for the stadium at St. Michael's. I am not recommending that. I'm recommending that we just do the Easton High School Stadium for right now, and see how this goes, rather than spending an additional, $23,000. But I wanted to put that out there as something for the board to consider.
Do they get cheaper the more units you purchase?
They do not, because it's a contract price. So.
Since it's a pilot program, it seems like to me it would make the most sense to put it where you have the most people.
Yeah, I do agree with that, which is why we're recommending that. So anyways, thank you for that. And so on to the next topic. So the facilities master plan, this is an annual document that I provide to the board each year. I am going to go through this very quickly. So feel free to stop me at any time that you have questions. So to begin, I just want to always thank Dr. David Lever with Educational Facilities Planning, as he was.
We wanted to just step back 1 second.
Oh, yeah.
I guess I just wanted to check on whether it does make sense to put something in St. Michael's to try. I mean, I know it's a smaller number of people, Maybe we don't have football. I don't know. I just thought I'd open it up for discussion again because I just want to be sure that
So that area,
we're
the last I
thinking it
looked,
through.
it's not secure the same way the stadium is. You have a side entrance and there's more public access around that whole area. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
So
It's been a while. And you have the YMCA right next door.
it has changed. So there actually it is relatively secure. Now it's not secure like the stadium at Easton High School. So stadium at Easton High School has, 8-foot fences all the way around it. There are only 4-foot fences, to your point, Ms. Whelan-Cherry, down at St. Michael's. So it does provide, or it does create a little bit more of a challenge to have it be secure, but generally speaking, everybody enters through one spot. So it could be implemented at St. Michael's fairly well as well.
Well, I think if we're doing it for Easton, we need to do it to St. Michael's. We need to be equitable across the county.
That's why I
I
wanted
think
to
so as
include it.
well.
Okay. That's why I wanted to include the second quote.
I think we can pull this out of consent agenda on Wednesday as well if we want to, talk more about voting on it and not specifically have it in consent agenda. We can pull it out of consent agenda.
Yes. So I would probably provide a much abbreviated presentation at the Wednesday meeting, and then, yep. Okay. Very good. So once again, thanking Dr. Lieber. So the Educational Facilities Master Plan, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it is a long-range planning document that is used to help prioritize capital improvements, amongst other things, in the county. So the document is divided into 5 main sections, and I'll provide a brief summary of each section and then conclude with a couple issues that remain challenging to the planning process for the school system. So the first is the goals, standards, policies, and guidelines section. This section is broad in scope and includes information on the TCPS strategic plan, grade organization, staffing ratios, and also generally describes attendance areas and more. Lots of stuff in the first section there. Next is the community analysis. The community analysis section considers Talbot County's comprehensive plan, reviews changes in policy and population, and analyzes this information to make determinations that result in the best use of public school facilities. The Talbot County Planning Office has reviewed this document and has provided a consistency letter demonstrating support for this year's EFMMP. Section 3 is the inventory and evaluation of our facilities section, includes information relevant to the current conditions of our facilities, which is utilized by the Public School Construction Program to maintain a statewide facilities database. Section 4 focuses on school enrollment data and is meant to analyze, track, and ultimately recognize student enrollment trends, which will be used to support efficient facility utilization. The Maryland Department of Planning has reviewed our enrollment projections and supports the projections included in the Facilities Master Plan. This slide displays an excerpt from the approved letter that shows our current enrollment projections, which are within the required 5% of the state's projections. So next is a chart that just provides a visual representation of the elementary, middle, and high school enrollments and the consistency that we've seen and expect to see through 2035. Slightly decreasing, we'll note. The last section, the facility needs analysis, is the final section, and of the document is meant to provide an important measure as to the efficiency of our school system from a facility utilization perspective. This is the utilization of our schools by school, and then at the bottom, just kind of drawing attention to what we see. So 2025% utilized, third column from the left, shows us at approximately 80%. We do, same with enrollment, obviously expect to see a small decrease in the utilization percentage across the next decade, ending in 2035 with a 76.4% overall utilization across all schools. And then lastly, this is a public school construction program, Form 101.3, that just displays a summary of the capital improvement plan requests that were included in, requests that was included in FY27, which is the Easton Middle School roof, and then the future requests that you've seen in the capital improvement plan previously.
We've talked recently about the HVAC at Easton High School, and you seem to express concerns about parts and things like that. Are we confident they're going to make it until that year?
Easton High is next year, so FY28. So that would you would be seeing this request come through in September, and then hopefully get funding that year. Section is the actions for consideration, and the first two bullets are really about continuing to monitor the current housing developments that are underway and planned for for Talbot County, and also to continue to evaluate enrollment and update our enrollment areas, with the effort or with the purpose of trying to, I would say predict, but react maybe more accurate to enrollment changes that would better support school populations. And then lastly, just continue to monitor Tillman Elementary School due to its elevated per student instructional and operational costs. That is kind of something that continues to live in this document because it's so low in its overall utilization. So I know that was a lot. I know there's a lot in this document, but I can certainly try and answer any questions that the board may have.
So the good news is I was talking to a council person, and I won't name names, but he did mention that the county is considering replacing that falling down auditorium. So we need to keep pushing that, please. If you need to know who it is, I'll let you know afterwards.
Okay, I appreciate that.
But all of them need to be pushed.
No one else on this facilities master plan? If not, we'll move on to Dr. Einhorn with the virtual day instruction plan.
Good evening and thank you. I'm hoping this will be relatively quick. As you are well aware of, in 2013 during the legislative session, there was the provision for a virtual plan for schools, and the local Board of Education can authorize the superintendent to implement virtual learning in the event of inclement weather, only when all of the inclement weather days built into the calendar are used. There are several requirements that have to be in the virtual day plan in order for it to be acceptable at the state level. And you can see those provisions that are listed on the board here. Most importantly, we have to ensure that our students have 4 hours of synchronous learning on any given day that we are implementing virtual instruction. And we also have to have a plan for students making up missed work in the event that they are not able to access synchronous learning during a virtual day. So the board has the past 2 years approved our virtual day plan, and we have had occasion to implement it, and I'm pleased to say that we have done so successfully. It is certainly not something that we choose as the first option for student learning, but we do know that once we go beyond the days that are built into the calendar, it starts to become a hardship for families, for our teaching staff. So it behooves us to have this as an option and then decide whether or not we invoke it as we go through possible inclement weather. So one of the requirements for the plan being able to be used is that it's presented at a board meeting, and there's opportunity for the board members to discuss the plan. There have been no revisions to the plan from what we've had last year, except I did update the the date to indicate the 26-27 school year, and you do have a copy of that in Granicus for your review. And this will be part of the consent agenda on Wednesday. That is correct. This is considered an open meeting.
I was going to say, anyone have any questions on the virtual plan?
I don't have a question. It's just, I feel like I need to say it out loud. It was from an elementary school teacher during the last virtual, and she was, and this just might be elementary versus high school, but she was a little annoyed because she was really working virtually, and she probably has a high schooler, in the high school, it was, I don't know. I don't even know if I should bring it up, but she spoke to me about it. So it was like, go read or it was not as much work as the elementary teachers have to do during the virtual. She wanted to make sure everybody's working the same.
I know one thing that we said, and I think each year we get better. I think we'll pick a date like before it comes so that we can make sure, I forgot what date we said, but we'll pick a date so that everybody prepares so that if that comes, it's not a scurry. We're not trying to figure it out. Everything's already in place.
Professional development
Yeah,
kind of thing.
exactly. Like just something. So we're going to start to do that.
Okay, going once, going twice, sold. I would like to ask for someone to make a motion for us to adjourn.
I make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
All right, that's it for tonight. We'll see you back